All right, thank you very much, Archer. I'm going to try to move swiftly here because I believe we have to leave the room at 6 sharp. So we're going to have 2 presentations and hold questions until the end, and then take questions in rounds. Are 2 speakers actually here right now? Okay, good, because maybe you can, you want to sit there and talk all day. Okay, good. So we're going to start with Mr. George Ortsin, who is the County Program Coordinator of the UNDP Global Facilities on Small Grants program in Ghana. And I won't say more because we're pressed for time. You can read quite a bit about Mr. Ortsin in the biography. And after his presentation, we'll go directly on to Daniel Mamyev's presentation. Mr. Mamyev is an indigenous elder from the Altai Republic of the Russian Federation, and also is the leader and founding director of the Tengri School of Soul Ecology. Translating for Mr. Mamyev will be, excuse me just a minute here, yes, will be Aryan Kamaganova, sorry about that. So please, Mr. Ortsin, if you would. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Once again, I add my voice to all the speakers who are thanking the artists for inviting us. As I listened through the presentations, one common thing came out very strongly, and that was the issue of culture. And culture is very dynamic. Culture is also influenced. It could get adulterated. And culture is something that is also resilient due to the setting up of the people. So I'm looking at the ecological and the socio-cultural resilience of the sacred landscapes in the coastal savannah ecosystem of Ghana. And the presentation will look at the study area that we have been discussing or been studying, and then describe the typologies of biocultural landscapes, the threats, the landscape approach that we have been embarking upon. The purpose of this actually is to share our experiences in managing traditional landscapes in the coastal savannah of Ghana. And surprisingly, the coastal savannah is exactly the area that migrated to the North and South Carolina, which was just presented. And the culture is almost the same. I mean, the livelihood systems and everything is the same. I also want to discuss some of the challenges that we are facing, and then draw the new paradigm shifts, and then discuss the way forward for us. The total landscape area that we are discussing is about 1.3 million hectares. And traditional landscapes is about 4,400. It's just about 0.3. But then the entire landscape is made up of the Akan-speaking culture. And they had a lot of interaction with the whites. They were the places that the whites settled when they came to West Africa for the first time. And they also had the first access to Christianity and Islam as well, and they had gone through a lot of cultural changes. So we carried out a study, and about 226 cultural landscapes were surveyed, and these are the location of the landscape as we see the dots there represent the various locations. And the sizes ranges from 200 hectares to as small as less than 10 hectares. Now, looking at the entire stretch, the definition of sacred landscape became very common, that these are areas of cultural importance which have been conserved, protected, and governed by traditional norms, belief systems, and technologies. And they are based on sacred beliefs and historical antecedents that might have occurred on the site. So that is the definition. And these are some of the objects that may be found within the cultural site. It is also considered as an area of interaction between the living, the dead, and the nature. And this has occurred over time and produced some distinctive characteristics with significant aesthetic, ecological, and cultural values. And the various typologies of sacred landscape could be identified. One is the sacred sanctuaries that protect wild animals like crocodiles, monkeys, royal pythons, birds, etc. Then we have sacred rivers and watersheds, and sacred family shrines or deity where there's interaction between the living and the dead. Then we have mountain sacred stones and battlegrounds, where areas where ancient wars were fought. Now these areas have been conserved. Then we have royal burial grounds where heroes and paramount chiefs are buried, and protective gods, and forests that are conserved just to meet livelihood requirements. So there are different typologies of landscape systems that were found in the area. Now most of the areas have been conserved over 250 years, and they are considered as places of spiritual enhancement and reconnection. And this provides a very high scenic beauty and treasury of wealth, security, property, and environmental protection for the people. It's also a storehouse of medicinal plants, very valuable to the people, and therefore it is part of their healthcare system. And they protect several watersheds, and they are vital also for conservation of culture, religion, and other things. In terms of biological significance, it's a very high spots with the genetic heat index exceeding 200. And they provide protection to some of the wholly protected species that are found in our country. Now, if we look at the stewardship, the ethics of the stewardship, the sites are held in trust for the living, the dead, and the yet unborn. So in it is both an issue of sustainability. So the living will have to take care of it, both for the dead and for the yet unborn. And the stewardship is corporal. Everybody's responsibility is placed within the community to make sure that these are kept. And the principle requires improvement in management from both conservation and spiritual perspective. So it has two elements. You conserve, and at the same time also you enhance the spirituality of the people. It also ensures interdependency. So interdependency between the living and then the sacred resources. So it is their responsibility to try to make sure that they keep these resources and promote religious and spirituality to support sustainable development, biodiversity conservation, and increased responsibility in environmental management. So these three concepts were found to be cutting across: biodiversity conservation, sustainable development, and environmental management. The management aspect is also built in the biocultural system of the people. And these are embedded in the cultural values and practices, the use of totems as biocultural heritage handed down from generation to generation. And then the biocultural heritage is both tangible and intangible. And they are in the forms of the traditional norms and practices, spiritual beliefs, knowledge and practices, and variety of species protection. They have various annual culture practices that are used to enhance the management of these areas. So if we look at it, the conceptual framework for managing sacred landscapes are from the cultural value, spiritual value, functional social setup system, that is the chieftaincy and the other systems, and then also from economic point of view, because the livelihood of the people are dependent also on their resource. And this flows into conservation of the sacred landscape. So it is more or less embedded in the lifestyle of the people. However, there are certain challenges. The traditional leaders that we interviewed didn't see any challenge because they think the whole system is embedded in the lifestyle of the people, and therefore it is something which can survive over time. However, we were worried because of the changing attitude of the people, especially the young ones, and the drive for prosperity and breakdown in traditional norms and practices. And our studies showed that 75% of these sacred sites were under stress. And these stress were from illegal chainsaw operation, agricultural landscape, encroachment, urbanization, infrastructure development, annual wildfires, changing cosmovision, and breakdown in traditional systems. So these were some of the threats that were being faced. And the emerging effects are that cultural and spiritual significance of the sacred sites were gradually diminishing. And already 75% have lost their original boundaries, which means that the sizes are becoming smaller and smaller. And 5% of them had been totally desecrated. So the concept of corporal management was also gradually dying out. And this has compelled the government to give a second look at the whole system to see if there could be a law to protect the area. Now, this calls for a new management system, or a new management approach, where you do not only look at the sacred site, but you look at the entire landscape as a management intervention. So we need to adopt integrated landscape and an adaptive management approach that ensures a clear understanding of the status of the landscape at the beginning as a basis for certain priorities for collaborative action. Why this paradigm shift? This is necessary to maintain and revitalize, at the same time rebuild socioeconomic production landscape in times of global change and challenges. At the community level, it is to create resilience with practices that further well-being and also support key ecosystems and functions in the biodiversity. The methodology that we are adopting is based on community development and knowledge system to implement the Satoyama initiative, which is shortened as the COMDEX. And this starts from a very interesting principle. It starts with indicators that try to measure the capacity of the community's resilience and try to harness the services through innovation, adoption, and through institutions that regulate and ensure the sustainable use of biodiversity. It also links the community needs to biodiversity conservation. It supports communities in strengthening biodiversity and ecosystem functioning within the entire landscape. And it also monitor and evaluate project intervention that aim to strengthen resilience and support biodiversity conservation. The methodology enhances ecological and socio-cultural resilience of the sacred site in 4 different ways. One is the adoption of integrated landscape and adaptive management approach. This approach is cyclical and requires a clear understanding of the status of the landscape at the time of the intervention. And then you set up priorities for collaborative action. So it is a collaborative action of the people, the governance, and any outside intervention that is needed. It's also a process that ensures adaptive collaborative management, which is informed by the desire and perceptions of all major stakeholders in the landscape. And in this case, the sacred land site is the starting point for the intervention. The steps are, 1, you establish a baseline so that you know what is happening within your landscape. And then you develop an action plan for change. You select the indicators for tracking progress towards realizing desired outcome and describe in a strategy. Then with time, you monitor and learn how the landscape is progressing toward the desired outcome, and adopt management strategies to reflect changes in the landscape and in the needs of the people who live in the area. So this is the collaborative landscape approach that we are adopting in ensuring that we conserve the sacred lands as well as managing the entire landscape. So the management process starts from understanding the process, negotiating for the goals, designing and planning for intervention, implementing the intervention, and reviewing. So that's why we say it is cyclical. You know, you review, then you go back, and all these constitute the adaptive collaborative management approach. Now the goal will have to be smart, and at the same time to be spice. And by spice, we mean it should be subjective, participatory, interpreted and communicated, cross-checked and compared, empowering the people with diverse and disaggregated views and ideas. The community development and management for Satoyama initiative is the strategy that we are currently implementing. And we are piloting it in one of the major landscape areas in our country. We have done a problem analysis of the entire landscape. And this is one of the things that we observed, that there were illegal chainsaw operation. The sacred sites were becoming smaller. Soil infertility, that is why a lot of agricultural encroachment was on the sacred sites. There were areas that were being destroyed, erosion, etc. So this gives us an idea as to what is happening in the landscape. So the landscape gives visible elements like the habitat, the water site, the sacred site, production fields, as well as the invisible one, that is the drivers, things that are causing the changes that is occurring in the landscape. Then we look at intervention from 4 perspectives. One is ecological and geographic intervention. The other one is on the production system, what the people can do so as to minimize the pressures on the sacred site. And then the third one is livelihoods and how we can conserve also the socio-cultural practices of the people. So with this, then we develop an action plan, which is still based on the site for intervention. So we have cultural site protection, multi-cropping, soil, low input agricultural intervention, low soil conservation practices, etc. So this gives the people as well as all the stakeholders a case for intervention. In concluding, let me say that the threats on our sacred side is imminent, and this must be minimized. However, we cannot manage sacred sites in isolation. It must be looked at as a holistic view, taking the entire landscape into practice. So a new management approach is needed, and we need to develop indicators to measure the elements of socioeconomic production landscape resilience that are almost by definition strongly interrelated. We need to develop a new approach that will ensure ecosystem protection, agricultural biodiversity, knowledge, learning and innovation, social equity, and infrastructure. Thank you very much.